You are now listening to the HBCU Wall Street podcast.
Oh my God, Carolina chicken waffles.
The Carolina
chicken waffles, where is that?
All right, first of all, the food is good.
I just had to come back to get some dab because the chicken was fire.
It's the best chicken they've ever had.
This lemonade is the bomb.
They need to come get some.
They need to come get some right now.
I had the chicken bites, and I normally don't like anything hot, but these were off the chart. I mean, they weren't too hot, they weren't too mild. They agreed with me, and the waffle, I had the pecan waffle, and this time I've got the red velvet waffle.
Man, excellent food, excellent service.
The service, the customer service, the love, the commitment, all these things make for a better experience. That's what matters to me, and that's why I keep coming back.
Carolina chicken and waffles, come try it, you won't regret it.
You better come get it while it's hot.
Man, this is the best food, hands down. I don't know what they put in it, but I can't stay.
That I'm so excited about. I am Amber Rani with HBCU Wall Street, and we are presenting HBCU DEI Talks with Modupé Congleton. And Modupé, you have had and held so many titles in your space, which also I think speaks to the great mobility that you've been able to have in your career. But today you are the Director of Global Inclusive Engagement at Amazon. I said that correct, right? Okay.
Yes.
And so just to give our readers a quick overview of who you are, and then we'll, drill deeper into the conversation. Being the Director of Global Inclusive Engagement at Amazon, that we all shop at, we love, we know about. But you're really a dynamic woman in this DEI space, and we know that it's a relevant conversation to everyone in this world, and that's why it's global now, right? It used to be something that was probably a little bit more local, and at least starting out anyway, where we were having the conversation in America, because race relations is a pretty big topic, right?
Yeah.
And not to say that it's just about race, but it's become this global perspective where it's not just about physical representation, right? There's so many layers to DEI. And so I think that just having you here to kind of give us your insight and experience and all of the wonderful things about you, it's just a pleasure to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you, Amber. I'm excited to be here. I am a proud member of the HBCU community. And so anytime there's a moment to connect with my fellow HBCUers, I'm excited. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So I have to quickly say Aggie Pride.
Oh my gosh. Well, I went to NCCU, so it's Eagle Pride for me, Aggie Pride for my daughter.
Yes. But it's all
the time. Aggie born, Aggie bred. Yeah, all of that. No. It's an Eagle Pride over here now.
It's all HBCU love. And here at HBCU Wall Street, we do advocate and love all HBCUs because they're so relevant to underrepresented individuals. And now we're learning that everyone wants to attend HBCUs as well.
Oh, yes. It's the popular thing to do now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Popular thing to do.
Exactly. So before we get into, just why you chose NCCU, and how it enriched your life, I do want to say that I approached this conversation in my research about you in my own way. So I did, do my web search and just learn about who you are and the amazing things that you've done. But I did, meditate on our conversation and just kind of go within and pray about our conversation and just kind of see what God, wanted to make me aware of.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that came to mind, and I was like, just kept saying your name over and over again. And the first thing that came to mind was the power is in her name. And I was like, well, that's an interesting thing to say because I don't know what Modupé means. But that's the insight that just
Did you look up?
I did look it up. So when I looked it up, because that came to my mind, that the power is in your name, I said, well, okay. So I looked it up and it means I am thankful, right? Well, that's what I
is.
Thankful,
Thank God. Yes.
Yeah. And so I said, oh, I get it. So, I think that language is powerful, right? Language is energy, is vibration. And the fact that you have such a name that when you say it and others say it, it just creates this energy of gratitude. And
Mhm.
personally, I just feel like gratitude is such a flow of favor and blessings, and it connects us closely to God. So I just thought that
Yeah.
that was really awesome that your name, just whenever it's said, it's just bringing that, that energy in. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to I'll say thank you, but thank God for just giving you that
Yes.
insight.
Hey, let me just tell you what you just did for me in this moment. So I got up this morning and I went for a walk outside, and these hotels are so big, so you can
Yeah.
easily just walk around the hotel and get like a mile or two in, with no problem. But I often reflect on every single day, it's a conscious choice to wake up and be grateful,
Mhm.
or to just simply say that phrase, like, thank you, Lord. And
Right.
so the fact that we are starting this conversation with the spiritual foundation, I want to say thank you for that, because it's it's going to lift me to a different level when I walk out of here and I go and connect with all of these, women leaders that are downstairs. There's 1,800 of them.
Wow.
Um, and being able to just walk in that grace because of the power of this conversation. So thank you for starting it there.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. I always love to, to start. Let's start with the positive, and then
Yes.
bring us more grounded. So,
I love it. I love it.
with
Yeah.
that being said, Miss Eagle Pride,
Yeah.
what did draw you to NCCU, and how did it enrich your life and just influence you in to becoming the woman that you are today?
Yeah. So when I went to North Carolina Central, my mom was actually working there. And I can't remember the department that she was working in, but I basically, I had my daughter when I was a senior in high school. And so all of the plans that I thought I had of leaving North Carolina and moving to the big city and going to a college, other places, it paused for a second. And I really got to this place where I forgot how to dream.
Mm.
And I remember sitting down talking to my mom one day, and she said to me, she was like, why don't you apply to Central? And I said, oh, okay. The sad thing was literally it was just in my backyard, right? Because I
Yeah.
lived right in Raleigh. And I hadn't even considered applying to North Carolina Central, hence forgetting to dream. And
Right.
so when I applied to Central, got in, and I felt seen, right? That experience where, I just feel like when you are, the beauty of being at a HBCU is your beauty hits different,
It
right?
does.
Your hairstyles hit different. Like who you are, you no longer feel foreign
Yes.
because you get there and there are so many people that either look like you or that just accept and appreciate you. And so I started at Central, but then, like, some people, I stopped for a while and life started life, and I went back to Central, but I went back with like, it was a vengeance by this point,
Yeah.
right? Like it was, I gotta make it. I'm determined to make it. And so I had no real understanding of who I wanted to be when I first went to Central. But when I went back, I knew when I went back, I was determined to make it, right? So we will call
Mm-hmm.
making it whatever that meant. Whether it was at the time, I knew I needed to make money to feed my family, just
Right.
to survive. But while I was there, I had an opportunity to. This is taking me back because Central was really a blessing for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I know
Um,
the feeling.
and if I get emotional for a minute, it's going to be because I'm really thinking about the blessing
No, and
that,
I love that because I
yeah,
almost got emotional when we were talking about gratitude. And I was like, okay,
yeah.
Amber, bring it in.
I'm telling you, because here's the interesting thing. When I went back, I also started working at Central. It's like that
Okay.
piece of my journey that I forgot. I worked at Central full time while I was a mom and while I was going to school full time. So picture that.
Yeah.
You go to work 8 a.m. On my lunch breaks, I took classes. I would, sit there. I was working in the BBRI,
Okay.
which is the biomedical center at Central. I was just an office assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And so during, while I'm there answering the phones, I'm also doing my work. And as soon as I would get off, I go pick my kids up from school, take them to the sitter, and go back to class. So from that 6 to 9, I was in
Yeah.
class, and I was on that grind for like 3 years straight because was a vengeance. I had to succeed. I had to make this work. But during that time, I, like most students, I was like, okay, I can't do this business administration, thing because math is not my jam. So I got to get out of this economics class.
Oh,
And
yeah. Oh, gosh. Economics is different.
It's different. Yeah, man. I'm like, okay, it's a special place for people to do that stuff. But I ended up going into the mass communications department. And while I was there, that's where the experience of Central really came to life for me. And so I started working on the campus newspaper. I didn't realize that I was a writer until I got to that department. Now, here's the piece that's so ironic that I didn't even connect. My father owned a newspaper and 2 radio stations.
Oh, wow.
And so it was literally now all starting to make sense because as now I'm working, I'm in mass comms, but I'm also going out and I'm covering stories on campus and in the community and doing different things. And it was through that experience that I started to really understand where I wanted to pursue, like what career path I wanted to pursue.
Yeah.
And then I started to just create this dynamic opportunity for myself where I looked into all types of communications careers. So public relations, executive communications, journalism. I started to move away from journalism because at the time I didn't think they made enough money. And so if I wanted to make money, I'm like, okay, I need a career that's going to pay me. And so it didn't necessarily yield those results when I was doing journalism. But once I switched and started to do more PR type of work, that's when I did like internships with Supreme Court judge down in Raleigh. And I did internships with the Herald Sun, right? Getting more involved in the marketing side of things and, creating ads and doing campaigns. And so I created those opportunities for myself through NCCU and the campus newspaper.
Oh, awesome. That's amazing. And I mean, just so again, like that just speaks to when we talk about diversity, right? Like the variety of experience that you have from communications to branding to marketing to to DEI. I mean, I think that it's masterful in the way that you have culminated all of these things, right? To get you to this point. And I feel like that's something I know for me anyway, I can speak personally. That's something that I've struggled with at times. And like, how do I pull all of this together?
Yeah.
And I think that it's something that I'm still kind of, figuring out. But to talk to you and to just see how, it just was synergistic in a way.
Yeah. I'll tell you, one of the things that's really important for anyone who has had that path that hasn't been like super linear, but it's been over here and gone in different directions. The key is to really continue to develop yourself. And so every phase of your life that you're growing and your mind starts to change or you begin to want new things, like go back on the journey to revisit some of the goals. I would write goals every year that I know I want to accomplish this. I know I want to make this specific amount of money. And every time I achieve those things, I will go back and revisit. So bringing it all together, to your point, is not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but it's that continuous journey of learning. Like, how do I seek advice on being able to tell the story, or what are my skills if I don't have the perfect portfolio? For example, with DEI, there was no career path to do DEI at the time when I was in school. I never saw myself doing or having a career in DEI. But it ended up happening that way because of the relationships that I've built, the experience that I have, the developing change management, like in just, developing those skill sets. And then when you look underneath foundationally, that's really the substance of what's required to successfully operationalize DEI in any company. You have to have like foundational skill sets that go beyond passion to be able to do the work successfully.
Exactly. And I mean, so I would be remiss, right, not to, because you made a good point, not to bring up the fact that we're, here speaking today and it's Women's History Month, and the fact that you were reminded of dreaming right, to dream by the most, influential woman in your life, your mom.
Yeah.
And I just think that to have that influence, right, it's so critical and pivotal because not everyone has that. And the fact that she spoke that into you,
Yeah.
and it propelled you in a way to
Yeah.
really go after what you wanted to get you here.
Yeah.
And so we know that, we're not here by our own merits and others pull us up along the way. And
Right.
so when we think about that at NCCU, just to, ask you, who would you credit, as far as your professors and your mentors, and really like giving you that insight and helping you during your time at NCCU?
Yeah, the first person I would say is Bruce DePeisler. He was the head of the campus newspaper, and he was just awesome. Everyone loved, we called him DP. And cool thing about DP is that you could see that he saw something in you, but he also created space for whatever idea you had. He would create space for you to bring that idea to life. And in addition to that, I remember just going to him like, DP, I have this idea. Like, what if we sell ads for the newspaper? Like, and we go out to the local stores, like the community, right? What if we allow them to place an ad in the newspaper? He was like, do it, see if it works.
Yeah.
And so it was just some of those small things that he gave us an opportunity to do. In addition to that, I'll tell you, because my mom did work there, so I could always pop over and go see my mom, right? When I needed to. But it was also, the head of the BBRI at the time, I believe it's Dr. Kenneth Haywood, if I'm not mistaken.
That name sounds familiar.
Yeah, I have to look up his name, but there was another sister. She was my boss at the time. Her name was Stars Best. I know I was making her so mad because I'm running in late from class, but she never complained. It was as if she saw that I was trying, and that was a determination in me. And so just those people that were, there silently cheering you on, and you don't realize that they're silently cheering you on until years later when you run into them and they're like, see what you're doing, keep doing your thing, right? And you're making them proud. And so even those moments where you might get, discouraged, because it's hard when you're on a journey, and you begin to question your why, or you begin to question what's next, or am I doing this the right way, or did I have the type of impact I want to have? It makes you feel good when you can think about or run into those people who were cheering you on and they're proud to see where you are.
Yeah. So I'm kind of going off script a little bit, but if you were to speak to fellow HBCU students, and again, this is for those tuning in as well, what advice would you give about leaning into your individual power and owning who you are and showing up in spaces that might seem intimidating at first?
Yeah, I would say that with change, it's going to be uncomfortable. So naturally, when something is uncomfortable, we want to run from it.
Yeah.
And here's the one thing, I think that for HBCU students, going to an HBCU can be such an enriching and uplifting experience that it can be euphoric.
Yes,
to some degree.
Absolutely.
And then you graduate, and if you don't have a plan, or you do have a plan, or you're going right into corporate America, it's like you go from this high to then being dropped.
Yep.
And back into reality, because that's ultimately what it is. Your reality is now one where you have to coexist with people from different cultures, different backgrounds. They don't understand your culture. You don't understand theirs. So there's different tension points that will happen.
Yeah.
And so I would say is that spend time getting to know cultures that are different from our culture. Yeah. And the reason why is because it sets you up to be able to feel more comfortable in different rooms, to walk up to people and introduce yourself. And with knowing that you don't have to shriek. We can be proud of our experience. Where was I? I was just somewhere where we were talking about, I was with other fellow HBCU graduates, but we were talking about those moments on campus where at Central it was called the 1040 break,
Okay.
right? Where you can go outside as a DJ, it's like people out there trying to sell you stuff, but it's a good moment. It's that good moment. Every
Yeah.
HBCU has that moment, right?
Right.
So, but those are those moments that we don't think that we can tell in other rooms. And so I would just say, don't shriek, don't hide who you are, but also know that it's good for you to understand and connect with other people about their cultures. The last thing I would say is travel and travel a lot.
Yes.
Travel a lot.
Please.
Exposure changes your life.
Yeah.
Exposure changes your life. I've had a wonderful career, but it wasn't until I started to travel internationally a lot, traveling alone internationally, going to countries that are maybe male dominated countries.
Yes.
And you see that, we are seen differently in other
Yeah.
places. I've encountered some very uncomfortable experiences, but it teaches you again, you understand the nuances of those cultures. And it also either helps you understand your culture better, appreciate who you are, but just being able to navigate life. So that's what I would say is step out of the bubble of being in the HBCU world to connect with other cultures and other people because it prepares you for the real world.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it probably lends to like the mobility to that you are, that you're able to like move within
100%.
organizations, yeah, and make those pathways. So
Yeah.
now I think we're kind of leading into this conversation about different cultures and
Yeah.
just broadening your perspective. So you're at NCCU. Mass communications, journalism, and then you have this shift into organizational leadership.
Yeah.
So what was that switch in your mind that said this might be interesting to
Yeah.
do?
You know what? It was at that moment in my life where I started thinking about what was going to be the next advanced degree. And I
Okay.
always wanted to go to law school. But at the time in my life, I was in what was called a senior org adoption leader. And
Okay.
so, as a senior org adoption leader, your responsibility is global transformation. And so, whether
Okay.
it was, and I was doing this for an $11 billion organization.
Wow.
And so, in that particular role, I was focused on certifications, right? Like change management certification, business process management, Six Sigma certification world. But my schedule was also one where I might be on calls at 4 a.m. And then again, I'm on calls at 8 p.m. So my schedule was all over the place. And so I didn't really have the time to say, okay, if I wanted to go back for an advanced degree, which I wanted to go to law school, now might not be the time based
Yeah.
on I need to keep my job. And so that's where I started to look into executive programs. And that's where I came across the program at Villanova
Okay.
and organizational leadership. And so if you think about at the time in my career, I started out communications, sales, marketing, now in this large scale enterprise wide org adoption, change management, and what would be a wonderful wrapper on top of that experience is understanding organization structure, understanding the dynamics of organizations, overall leadership, but more importantly, what do we understand about the operations aspect of an organization? What are the design tenets around an organization? And so it was basically an opportunity for me to take everything we talked about earlier, like bringing it all together,
Yeah.
and then taking the wrapper of organizational leadership so that it became the umbrella for everything else to fit underneath.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And I think too, again, like I don't, so I'm not gonna, how can I put this? I think that you have such a um I want to say rebellious, like refreshing, innovative way of pursuing things. that
Yeah.
may not seem foreign to you, but from the outside looking in, it's like, it's
Yeah.
amazing that you are able to think that way, right? To say,
Yeah.
well, okay, if I'm having these challenges, or if I have to figure out like how to navigate into the next phase of my journey, let me, look at certifications. Let me look at
Yeah.
programs where it may not be the advanced degree, but it's still propelling me, right? And so
Totally.
I think that you just probably have a natural affinity, like just to look for innovative ways to do things. And
Yeah.
so, what are some, when you think about DEI and again, the industry that we're in, and I think sometimes it does to organizations and maybe to clients feel a little bit stale
Yeah.
because sometimes it's approached in a way that is very traditional. What are
Mhm.
some innovative ways that HBCU students thinking about careers in that space, like what are some innovative ways that they can think about pursuing careers in DEI?
Yeah, I get asked this question pretty frequently, and whether it's speaking at an HBCU or different conferences, etc. So one of the things I would say to students is, the first assumption is to show up and tell a DEI leader, I'm passionate about DEI, and so I want to go into a career in DEI. And if you can imagine, if you are a DEI leader and you've been doing this for a while, you hear that pretty regularly.
Right.
And so that's not the thing that's going to make the person say, oh, really? Tell me more, because you're
Yeah.
passionate, right? But what is important is to understand that for every career, every industry, there has to be an opportunity to integrate, whether it's equity or create inclusion in every single thing that we do.
Yes.
Right. So at Amazon on our journey, we are looking at ways to be more intentional about how it's built into the fabric of who we are as a company. And so that's one of the things I would say to students. If you are in supply chain, I had a wonderful career in supply chain, and I got a chance to spend time on the Howard University supply chain board. And so that's an opportunity to look at how do we integrate diversity, equity, and of course inclusion into the supply chain industry. Are we, being innovative about how we're going after recruiting diverse talent?
Right.
Not just in the US, but even thinking about globally. How are we preparing the next generation to think about looking at talent differently? When you also think about, the fashion industry, for example, be intentional about looking at the fabric that's being used, or are we creating non-binary clothing from the beginning? So historical DEI is you create a program that addresses the need of a specific community, and you
Right.
bolt it onto right
Exactly.
the company or the organization.
Exactly.
You bolt it on, and we've got DEI done, right? But the new way is that how do you create this opportunity where it's seamless? It's seamless. When you walk into a store, was it inclusive?
Exactly. It
Right?
automatically feels that way,
It
right?
automatically feels it. It
Instead of
feels
it
that.
being performed. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you ensure that it's not performative? To go back to
Right.
the store example, if you walk into a store, and when you walk into the store, for someone who doesn't have mobility issues, no problem. But did the store think about, okay, 20% of my customers may be in wheelchairs, or
Yeah.
20% of my customers, 10% may be visually impaired? Did they think about that in the design of the building? So those are some ways where I would say to students, wherever you are in your journey right now, think about the work that you're doing and how can you integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion in what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
I literally, my phone just locked, and the Sunday Duckett she just gave us so many gems last night, and Melody Hobson too. So maybe some of these things will come up in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think that's what's important is don't look at it as first, don't go up to anyone who's a DEI leader and say, I'm passionate and
I'm
I want to
passionate
do
about
what you do.
DEI.
I want to do what you do. And then it's no, but be able to say, thinking about the impact of AI on
I was going
our
to ask you that. I'm glad you
community.
brought that up.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the impact of AI on our community. And here's some ideas that I have on how we can address like the systemic racism that exists,
Yeah.
whether it's in the prison system or these different, right? How do you help solve solutions or bring solutions to the table that address systemic issues versus just designing a program that's bolted on?
And you know what? So with AI, I came across something the other day where they were it revealed that even AI, right, is showing its implicit bias, right? When asked questions about different communities. And I
Right.
was like, okay, so then there's the opportunity too when you think about innovation to say, because a lot of times people say, well, how can AI help us? But it's
Yeah.
how can we help AI
Yeah.
in this space to better understand how it speaks to and creates content right around different communities and how it perceives different communities
Mm-hmm.
instead of allowing that implicit bias to just pervade and then maybe be harmful
Right.
in the long run. And so I also think too that maybe that's a gap or an opportunity where we have new fresh minds coming into the space to say, how can you get in the forefront of AI and help
Yeah.
to right at all levels make sure that inclusion is built in from the ground up.
Totally. And that's where like representation matters.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
who's designing the systems behind the scene where AI is being leveraged?
Yeah.
And if it's going to impact various communities, who's designing it? Is
Mm-hmm.
it people that look like the community that's going to be impacted? Like we know about, some of the stories where, well, I've experienced this, and hopefully, I'm sure a lot of sisters have. But whenever I have braids, and you're in TSA, and you go
Oh
through,
yeah, yeah.
and they got to check your head and go
Right.
like this. And I'm like, this thing is so, oh my God. And I always have a comment and they look at me like, whoa. And I'm like, yeah, because just because I have braids, it's sending you an alert to say there's
Right.
something artificial there. That's insulting.
Well,
It's insulting.
it is. And then too, if you understood right just the culture around hair,
Yes.
you would actually understand that it might be a little bit harder for you to hide something in braids, maybe.
Thank you. Thank you. If you understood how long I had to sit there to get these done, I don't have the time to even think about hiding
Okay.
anything. But imagine if when those whatever that machine is was designed, just imagine if it was a sister there that
Right.
said, hey, I already know this is going to be triggering for some Black women who go through here. So we need to make sure if it does happen, if it, because we do
Mm-hmm.
also want it to do its part, um, that it's not something where maybe it's training the TSA team so that they don't have to go. Now you're putting your hand on my head, right? And
Right.
it's the whole thing. As you can
It,
see, that just took me for a moment.
no, well, too, and then I mean, because it makes sense too when you think about operationally, right?
Yeah,
It also probably makes you maybe a little bit more ineffective in
totally.
the time and just to have to pull someone away when you could be using that time for other things.
Yeah,
So I don't want that
yeah,
we get where we're coming from with that one. But
right.
you so when you said supply chain, I thought about Cisco. So
Yeah,
your time in supply chain, was that at Cisco or was that Cisco and okay.
it was.
So okay, so I know you spent a lot of time at Cisco. I think about
Yeah,
14 years there.
I can write about 15 years.
Okay, 15
Yeah.
years. And
Hmm.
so then making that shift to Amazon, first I would have been, how excited were you to get that opportunity with Amazon? I mean, Amazon is such a household name, right? Like we know
Yeah,
it for just being able to get on our phones and shop and add things to the cart and have
right.
500 things in the cart, but
Hmm.
of course Amazon is this major tech company. So
Yeah.
what was that feeling like to just have that opportunity to make that shift?
You know what? When I started that, the vision boarding, I do the vision boarding and just
Yep.
really focus on manifesting for that
Yes.
year. When I started that particular year, I knew I had reached a point at Cisco where it was time for me to move on
Okay.
to whether it was not necessarily within the company because I moved around the company many years. And so, but I started that year just knowing this is the year that it's time for me to move on. And so I wrote down a list of companies that I would be okay to like go after an opportunity. Amazon was one of those companies. And so I did the process. And so this is also a message to everyone on the team. Always invest in yourself. Like it's one thing to put something down on a vision board and say, I hope this happens. But then you've got to do the work to ensure that it does happen.
Yes.
And so, for example, I knew if this was the year that I was going to, go after a new opportunity, et cetera, I invested in getting my resume updated, getting my LinkedIn updated. And so with those things, I instantly started to get like hits from different companies, right? And the good thing is what it was all of the big tech companies that I listed as ones that I would go to. And when Amazon came, it was one of those moments where I wrote Amazon down on the list, but it came so quickly that I was like, oh, wow. But I knew people here. So I reached out to people that I knew here, asked about the opportunity. They told me it was an amazing opportunity. And but they also said, but the interview process is intense. It's intense. So
I can imagine.
Oh yeah, it was. I prepared for that interview for those interviews for weeks.
Okay.
For weeks. But when I tell you it tests your ability to understand how good you really are.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's I think it was 6 rounds of interviews. 6 rounds of interviews. Yeah. And you have to be able to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
How do you take your experience and completely tell your experience through the lens of Amazon leadership principles and align it to the leadership principles? And so I remember going through that interview process and thinking to myself, wow, I've done some good stuff.
Yeah.
I've done some good stuff and I felt good about it. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I mean, so you kind of took the words out of my mouth because I always try to, let me not say always. Let me just be honest.
From time to time.
Right. In the past couple of years, I have leaned into this space of personal branding, right? So it's not just, me begging for this opportunity, but it's me showing up and saying, what am I bringing, right, to help this company be successful and help to bring impact to this company. And so you had to go through 6 rounds of interviews, and of course, like personal branding is a major part of that, and storytelling. And so what did you feel that you were bringing to Amazon that would positively impact such a major tech company? Like what was it inside of you where you were like, you know what, you're like, I am that girl. Like,
I am that girl. I am that girl. I'll tell you, for me, it was a couple of things. I started my career at Cisco in sales.
Okay.
And in sales, which is a great place to start your career in an organization, because when I started my career in Cisco sales, this is your opportunity to really understand the company.
Yep.
Because you're selling the products and services that the company has to offer. And so that's one. So I didn't just sell, but I had the skills to build relationships, to negotiate, to influence, to know that a soft no isn't a hard no.
Right.
And also have the intentionality of going back to build relationships and being meaningful about what building relationships look like. So it was some of those skills that I'm like, okay, well, I know this part. And then it was the experience. I had the experience. And I also had the experience of being a leader. And so because I had led teams, because I had the global experience of leading global teams and understanding transformation, one of the best moments of my career was the time I spent traveling back and forth to Istanbul, Turkey.
Okay.
And I launched an innovation center there. And so I'm in the US leading this team in Istanbul for us to launch this innovation center. And so you think about it's now taking the Silicon Valley tech mindset and doing it in what is considered the Silicon Valley of the Middle East.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I knew I had all of that experience. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about with a message to the students about doing DEI. It's really the foundational experience, like the core competencies that you develop throughout your career that ultimately will help you do DEI successfully. And then you can layer in, like, understanding culture and understanding people and,
Yeah.
the important aspects of communities that
Yeah.
you layer in. But I don't know. I felt like I had what they needed. And I was also curious about what it had to offer me in this next journey of my career. Yeah.
And we have to lean into curiosity, right?
Totally.
So to your earlier point too, it's like, I think we have a lot of leverage points as a community that we don't realize sometimes. And so
Yeah.
when you mentioned, it's uncomfortable, to grow and expand, but a lot of times we kind of navigate our life in uncomfortable
Yeah.
ways, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an experience right there where you say, well, I've had to already do this. Like I've had to already be uncomfortable in spaces and still show up and still, and still speak up and be bold in a way. And so I think
Yeah.
that to HBCU students, it's about even just those skills of life,
Yeah.
and how you use that to your advantage.
And you know what, Melody, I just found one thing that Melody said yesterday that was so profound. And I've got a few things that I want to just share with the students
Yes,
here
please.
that were just gems. One of the things she said is you live your legacy every single day. And so if you think about just that discomfort, and if you are intentional about how you show up, the impact that you want to have not only on the world, but on your community. For many of the HBCUers, I know you're probably the first in your family to go to college, and it's hard. And if you're not the first, or if it's legacy, right? It's the third, fifth generation of people that have gone to this particular HBCU, you live that legacy every single day. So make it count. You got to make it count.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Man, okay. I could talk to you for hours. So
yes.
What I do want to do is just do a quick time check, because I know that we were scheduled for 1 to 2. Do you have a hard stop at 2? Well, 2 Eastern time?
I do.
Okay.
That's why I'm sitting here, and I don't know if you can hear all the chimes and different things going on.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can't.
Well, then, so I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna kind of jump ahead a little bit, because this is kind of a personal question for me. I had to be a little, greedy, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because again, I have worked in the DEI space as an analyst for a while. So the space that I've been in is, measuring and tracking employee perceptions and working with executives to better understand the nuanced challenges of their organization, and helping them build strategic action around those, those I'll say challenges, but also to their strengths.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I think is common for a lot of organizations is that bottleneck, right? And so we talked about like the traditional ends of DEI, where many organizations approach it in a sense of let me build the bottom up, and let us build representation across the bottom of the organization. But as we move up, it starts to feel a little bit more tense around the opportunities that are equitable, that are inclusive for everyone from different backgrounds. And so what are your thoughts around how organizations can meet this challenge in creative ways? Because a lot of times they meet it in traditional ways. So they say, well, let's recruit more diverse talent. But it's like, well, how are we recruiting that diverse talent, right? What's the language that we first present to individuals from diverse backgrounds? What's the job description? What's the branding? And so what are some, just out of the box ways that organizations can think to kind of alleviate that bottleneck when it comes to representation and equity and inclusion at higher levels of the organization?
Yeah, one of the things I would say I think is always a great opportunity for companies is the focus on retention. And so to your point, companies can continue to hire talent. You can build compelling strategies, right? Campaigns, et cetera, that makes a company appear to be the best company in the world to work for. You can be on lists, right? Next thing you know, everyone wants to work for you. You can even create culture influencers within the company.
Yeah, I love that.
They are draws to the company. I myself have been in that position where people become curious about what you do at that company. And so they're now interested in working there. And so I think that's one thing that I won't say it's easy to do, but it's easy to do. You can build those strategies. Where there's always opportunity, as I mentioned, is the focus on retention. And so how do we now ensure that we are continuously focusing on the culture of the company, the experience that employees are having, so that everything that they were sold on to be at the company, they want to stay here. They want to continue to grow. They feel seen and valued. And we also know the days are old where people are staying at companies for 20 years.
Yes. Yeah.
Not necessarily anymore. Maybe it's 2 to 4, maybe it's 4 to 6 years. And then people are going after the next opportunity, right? Social media influences a lot of the direction, right? And the different studies, et cetera. And so I think that the focus on retention is truly important. Now, here's the reality is that the higher you do go in the company, the opportunities are limited, right?
Right.
But there's also the opportunities for, and I want to I got ready to acknowledge one specific example, but I won't do that. A lot of the most senior executives within corporate have typically been there a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so is there a path or structure to start to look at those more senior roles and say, are we creating the right pipeline? Are we being intentional about successors? And are the slates for the successors, are we calling out if they're diverse enough? And in many cases, no one's calling it out.
Yeah.
And so that's where you can either address the bottlenecks that you talked about at the top, and where the representation starts to wean off quite a bit is because of the fewer opportunities that exist, but also we've got to be intentional about the pipelines. And then when is a healthy time to say, hey, executive, you've been in this role for 20 years. Maybe it's time to bring in a fresh perspective, a new leader. Let's bring in that successor and start to build them up so that that leader can plan to exit. I think there's some opportunities for companies there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, when you mentioned pipeline, we had this conversation a lot within HBCU Wall Street around pipeline and how we can more strategically build partnerships between large organizations or small organizations and HBCUs, because the talent is there, right?
Yes.
And so it's, to your point, how are we building this pipeline?
Right.
And I do think that we do have to have a conversation about, again, we have to get outside of the box a little bit.
Totally.
Because when you have requirements that are very traditional and you have to have this, degree, and you have to you are limiting yourself to a small pool of individuals, where if you were to diversify that a little bit, now, we have more talent pouring in. And so I do think that that's a conversation that, we can continue to have.
I also think, to your point about, to this conversation about building pipelines, I also think that PWIs leverage the alumni networks a lot better than HBCUs do, right? So imagine, I'll even use myself, for example, I'm hiring for a role at this very moment. Just imagine if I sent the blast out to the NCCU alumni, right? And so now I'm tapping into the many thousands of people connected, but it could also be that, hey, NCCU Alumni Association, come find me and say, hey, if you've got open roles, you can post them on our job boards, et cetera. So I think there's a greater opportunity for us to tap into all of the networks that are associated with our HBCU networks to build those lasting pipelines. So as soon as one is going out, we already know I got to reach back and make sure I've got more people on the slate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to make a hard shift because you do have a hard stop. But I wanted to just, I went again, research, just learning about you and who you are. I went to Instagram.
Yes.
And I was scrolling up like, she is fly, 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 fly. So
I love it. I love it.
And for me, it felt a little rare to see a woman at your level and just like proud and bold in your style and in your presentation of yourself. And I was like, just how do you manage and balance your personal brand, right? Being at such a level at a major tech company, but also too, like staying so fly and fashionable doing so. Like, where does that courage come from?
You know what? That's such a good question. So it's so many layers to it. So it might sound a little bit more dramatic than it is, but these things are all important to me. And so one, I'm very intentional about my personal brand because the Sunda Ducat says like you rent your title, but your character is who you are. Right. And so if you think about it, and I know I probably didn't say it exactly the way she did it, but the title is what I rent. When I work for a company, I'm renting the title. But who I am, who God made me to be, who my mama, my daddy, my grandparents, I am, and my daughter's mothers, right? Like I am their mother. And so I think that no matter what, I have to be able to stand on being proud of who I am as a woman, as a Black woman, as a Black woman of a certain age, and as a Black woman that has overcome.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, I truly believe that when I smile, oh baby, that smile is coming from someplace good.
I know
And
that's
it's coming from someplace deep within my soul that no one can take from me. And that was the one thing I would say my mom always taught me about going to college. And I learned also at NCCU is that there are a lot of things that people will try to take from you. But what no one can ever take from me is my education and my experience that I had with my HBCU. And so when I represent, I love fashion. That's one. I absolutely love fashion. I get a chance to be in some spaces with some of the most amazingly beautiful, fashionable, just fabulous women. And like they inspire me. I'm inspired by my mom's fashion. My mom was my first fashion icon.
Okay, mom.
And so she was very intentional about you don't leave the house looking crazy. And because of that, I taught that to my daughters. You don't leave the house looking crazy. So we show up and we show up well. But the balance is one where, because you're also in a high profile position, that I have to be intentional about knowing that the representation does matter. That a young girl in India, and this has happened to me just even a week ago when I was in Seattle, a young lady that was on my team, she reported into me for 2 years in India. I'd never met her because she was pretty nested in the organization. And when she met me, she said, I just want to tell you that every time I see you on camera, it makes me proud for what I can be one day.
Yes.
And so it's like, it's not just young girls from my community or like Black women from my, from our community, but it's people around the world. You represent something that means something to someone. And the way my mom was my first fashion icon, I want to be my daughter's first role model.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to respect your hard stop.
Thank
but
you.
Modupé, it has been such a pleasure speaking with you. We would love to speak with you again at a later date, if possible.
Anytime. And hopefully it could be in a studio or somewhere, wherever we could do it live, and have a wonderful conversation. So I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you. And if you, I'll follow up with you about your, your social media handles, and we'll include that in what we share with
it's
our
super
audience.
easy. MODUPE_C. That's it.
MODUPE_C on Instagram, all other platforms. You can find Modupé Congleton. And again, thank you. And I hope that you just continue to live your best life because you deserve it. Because you've inspired so many women.
I appreciate it. You all inspire me too. And thank you for doing this. You made this interview just so wonderful and so light as I'm sitting here in Las Vegas. So I appreciate you for just the experience today. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, and have a wonderful day. And kiss those beautiful daughters. And we will be speaking with you soon.
Hey, what's going on, HBCU family? This is Jamaris Payton, co-founder of HBCU Wall Street and author of HBCUnomics. I wanted to take a quick moment to thank each and every one of you all for listening in to the HBCU Wall Street Podcast Network. Hey, if you didn't know, we also have exciting shows called the HBCU DEI Talks, the Aggies Excel, and also the HBCU Podcast Show. Be sure to tune in, be sure to share, be sure to follow, be sure to join our community. Thank you.